and write 4 equations in the x direction and 4 equations in the y direction, and I'm done. So, the only new things, this is going to just look that it has a lot of symbols. So it will be Vx final, Vx initial, plus acceleration in the x direction multiplied by time, Vx final square, Vx initial square, plus 2ax x, x equals 1/2 Vx final, Vx initial t, x equals Vx initial t plus 1/2 ax t squared. And then I have identical 4 equations, which are Vy final. And then we have square. Then we're done with like 80% of chapter 4. Instead of just using 4 equations, we're going to use 8. Now let's take a very special case. This is where I promised you could know how to shoot, poop onto your neighbor's yard. Not promised you that you could, I promised you that you might be able to if you want to. You shouldn't, but we can. We are going to go to a special kind of motion in 2D, something called projectile motion. And the definition of projectile motion is as follows. Projectile motion is motion under the influence of gravity alone. Good? So projectile motion is an object moving under the influence of gravity alone. No air resistance, no jetpacks, nothing. So if you guys remember the example, if you're at that point where you see 8 equations, you're totally angry. So the mob decides, instead of just dropping the physics professor, is shooting the physics professor in the air. And the physics professor, assuming the air resistance is negligible, we don't care about it, this is called a projectile motion. Motion under the influence of gravity. So if you shoot your physics professor and the physics professor does not have a jetpack, that's called projectile motion. If the physics professor has his jetpack, then we use 8 equations. If the professor has, so you made sure I don't have a jetpack, as you threw me off, then this is called projectile motion. So let's look at this and see what we could deduce out of it. If you throw an object like this, and now it's moving under the influence of gravity, there is no other forces acting on it. Will I accelerate downward?
Yes.
Why?
Because
Because gravity always pulls down, and it's the only force. So I will accelerate. I had like a velocity I was going up for a while, and I was happy, but gravity slows me down, meaning changes my velocity, which means that's acceleration. And then I go to 0, and from 0 I will accelerate again. My velocity will change. So immediately, in projectile motion, the acceleration in the y direction is 9.8. So far, so good? Ruby. Now, when my velocity in the x direction change?
Velocity.
Will my velocity in the x direction, horizontal, will it change? Will I speed up in the x direction?
No.
Will I slow down? No? Yes? Maybe? Okay, let's try this one more time. Let's assume you decided now in the 5-minute break to jump in your spaceship and go up to space. You take a baseball and you throw it in space. Will that
No.
baseball slow down?
No.
Will it speed up? Meaning it will not
Will it change
It'll keep
velocity?
change velocity. And if you don't change velocity, what do we call that? Zero acceleration. So in the x direction, my velocity is not going to change, which means the acceleration is 0. So far, so good? Let's see the ramification of that on our equations. Cool? Let's go to the x equation. Acceleration is 0. 0 times anything is? Acceleration is 0. 0 times anything is 0. And then here, acceleration is 0, and 0 times anything is 0. If I look at this equation tells me that my final velocity is the same as my initial velocity, which we knew that because we don't have any acceleration. Right? Cool. And this tells me that my final velocity equals my initial velocity. We knew that already because we said the acceleration is 0. These equations kind of not very informative. And since my final velocity and my initial velocity are the same, they're going to be twice the velocity. You guys agree? 2 times 1/2 gives you what? 1, which is velocity multiplied by time. So my 4 equations becomes 1. Instead of 8, we have 5. So that's what we're going to do. Projectile motion, we are going to use, and acceleration is going to be g. Cool. So that's